What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Gabe Yanez and I, we are joined by Ben Baker, husband, father, and fittest dad on the block. You have the same goal as me. Ben, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I think a good place to start is Gabe and I, we were talking about, we were looking at some of your content and we were kind of talking about it. And I just have to ask, dude, I saw a video of you, bro, clean and jerking your wife. And I don't know. I mean, I've seen some impressive stuff, right? But that was pretty damn impressive. It looked like it was AI generated. You did it so well. Was it AI generated or was that actually happened?
That actually happened. And this is one of those times where I'll shout out my wife, because she was a cheerleader. So she knows how to be lifted. So that makes it much easier for me.
Okay.
Going back to what you said is, before we started recording, she does all the hard work, right?
She does, man. We have 4 kids, and my wife does not enjoy working out, but she does just for the sake of looking good and keeping up with our kids.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. From when this episode releases, about a month ago, we released an episode, both of us actually, Gabe and I, with our wives. And one of the things that my wife, her name's Ashley, she brought up was exactly that same thing. She said that, she doesn't have the same passion for fitness that I do. She doesn't look forward every day to getting up early and training hard. She does it because it's a necessity of her life, and she invites friends over now, and she wants to look a certain way. She wants to be able to feel good, but it's not like something like she's like, she's not like chomping at the bit the night before. Can't wait to do it, but the work has to get done, man. That's it. That's it. But anyways, that was a very impressive video. I would like to say I'm going to try it. I don't think. Have you seen the other video where the firemen's carry? Have you seen that one?
Yeah, that looks like so much fun. I got to try that.
Dude, we kind of tried it.
You did? Did you film it?
No, we didn't film it. We kind of tried it. So from the videos I've seen, basically what it is like you lay next to each other and you try and get the other person on your back. You know what? Now I'm inspired. After this podcast, I will go at some point today or tomorrow and I will attempt it and I will film it. Gabe, I'll send it to you to see.
But the whole point was to see if your wife can do it. You're going to be able to do it. The whole thing was can your wife get you out of a burning building if she absolutely needed to and you were out for the count?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm actually in trouble. Yeah. Oh, man. So, Ben, let's dive in, man. Tell us a little bit more about your background, about how you got to where you're at, about having 4 kids, about being in Arkansas, and about what you're about and what's going on.
So, man, just long-time student of fitness. I always played sports. And when I was playing football in college, I found out that I liked the weight room better than the actual sport. And, I thought I was going to go on to become a strength coach. But during my senior year, my wife became pregnant and the unpaid graduate assistant job no longer looked great. And so I got my first job in CrossFit here in Little Rock, Arkansas, man. And just fell in, I drank the Kool-Aid. All of the videos of you and Rich were big at the time. And so, man, I just I was in it immediately.
And what did you start coaching at a gym or what did you do?
Yeah. So there was a big box gym that had a CrossFit gym within it. And I just started coaching there. And it was in the early years of CrossFit, 2013, 2014, and just had an absolute blast in the community.
Did you ever get super into the competitive side? Because like Jason was saying, I've seen, a bunch of your videos and dude, it's impressive. And I like that everything has this comical spin, but with a message that I think that we all agree with and is really important. But all that aside, I count the plates on what you're doing and you're outside in the driveway and man, he got it out there. He got it on his back. He doesn't have a rack. It's all really impressive stuff. So how competitive did you get in the sport?
Man, so I tried and locally I did really well. And that was when CrossFit competitions were paying money when you won. And so I won a couple competitions locally and I was feeling real good. Yeah. And then you start getting in the open and you get humbled real fast. I think, so I was in North Central region. I think the best I ever finished in the open was 75th or 80th in my region. And locally in Arkansas, did really, really well. I think I was second in the state. But when you start looking at the grand scale, it was so competitive.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how things work? Like we talk about this a lot in jiu-jitsu, but how there's levels to the game. Like you could be at your local jiu-jitsu gym or local CrossFit gym, be like, yeah, I outperform all these guys, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you look at the grand stage, you're like, oh shoot, like there's a whole different level to the game. I remember feeling that way, as I came up in the sport, you'd be out and about and you would meet people, and then you would meet people who hadn't had that experience yet. And once they realized just how vast, how many people were doing the sport and just how much it was leveling up every single year, it was wild, man. So you were coaching at the gym. Coming from a college background, I'm curious, was it the community? Was it the coaching? What specifically drew you to CrossFit? And then how was CrossFit different than what you were doing as a strength athlete in football? Because if you're saying, hey, I was addicted to the weight room, I loved it. Did it transfer over well to CrossFit, or did you find some things in CrossFit that maybe weren't up your alley, or maybe things that you loved?
Yeah. So the first day I showed up to CrossFit, I'll never forget. Like the first thing, it was like 7 sets of 3 box squats, right? And I'm just like, I'm lifting more than everybody. I felt like I was on cloud 9. Day 2, we did Fran. And I just remember I sold my soul on 21 and 15. And I just remember, grabbing a drink of water and then looking over and everybody else was done. And I was like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, you sell your soul and you never come back from that.
No.
One thing that I started thinking about, as you were saying before, like getting into the sport, being really good in like the smaller community, but then, the open allows you to compare yourself to the everyone, and just kind of how humbling that was a little bit. One thing we talk a lot about on the podcast is children's sports. And I'm sure you have some takes there. And I heard a really interesting take in a podcast recently, and it was actually talking about how it used to be that because there wasn't, internet and social media and all these places to allow younger kids to compare themselves to everyone. And the person on the podcast was actually a really well-known distance runner, and I'm blanking on the name, but he was saying that had he had access to be able to compare himself to everyone when he was just becoming a runner early on, he would have probably gotten discouraged because, he wasn't particularly fast. He was fast like in his school and like, had a pretty good mile. And then he actually went on to be like a super, super successful runner. But the argument was that now, because you compare yourself to this huge group all the time, kids particularly, instead of just being like, hey, I'm a good, whatever it is, runner, baseball player, football player in my community. And that gives them like the motivation to like, keep going on to the next level. And a lot of this is just, kind of a war of attrition. Like if you're consistent for years, you could potentially be the really good guy. But if you're discouraged early on because some people peak at different ages. So I'm curious, maybe we can just have a conversation in general about, your kids' sports and fitness and the role that they're playing, your kind of take on it all. But that specifically I was thinking about, because I know it doesn't apply so much to maybe you when you were doing CrossFit more as an adult. But, I have 2 really young kids. We have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I say this on the podcast a lot, like I feel like I'm getting the cheat codes by talking to these dads that are, years ahead of me. So I love having these questions about like, how are you approaching that and keeping the motivation high in this world where like there is a lot of pressure and it's very easy to compare yourself to the best in the country, which you're never going to be better than the best in the country when you're that young.
Yeah, man, I think that's an important job for the parents. Because, comparison is difficult. I think if you guys have read Anxious Generation, phones can be a real issue for kids. However, I think if you kind of set the mindset of like, what's the worst that's going to happen, in comparing yourself, like if you go for it and you're seeing these other kids' times or the weights that they're lifting, like the worst case scenario, if you're not able to cut the mustard, like you still get incredibly fit and it's something that's going to serve you for life no matter what. And so I think that's kind of an important conversation for the parents. But like, listen, most of us are not going to go pro in a sport or in fitness. However, if you can do quality push-ups and pull-ups or run a mile in a certain time, that's going to serve you no matter what, whether you go pro or whether you become a banker. Those things are going to serve you. And maybe, just maybe, you're one of the few in that small percentage that something special might happen. And no matter what, it's a win-win.
How old are your kids, Ben?
I've got 9, 8, 5, and 2.
Okay. 9, 8, 5, and 2. And just, I have a almost 14-year-old and almost 11-year-old. So I'm in the thick of like I would say I'm in the thick of like competition baseball and starting to have, I would say I'm in the thick of competition baseball. I think that travel ball, competition baseball, we're deep in that world. I'd also say that we're like right on the cusp of high school. So I'm learning a lot through that process. So that's interesting to me. So I'm curious with your kids, what exposure have you provided them to the gym? And then what role do sports play for you and your wife? Yeah, I'll stop there.
Man, there's this program called Upwards that's it's like based through churches, but it's basically kind of like low barrier of entry, just get kids used to sports. And they wanted to play soccer. My wife and I know nothing about soccer. But just at the very least, getting them in like team building situations and stuff like that has been huge. And I have a hot take on fitness versus sports.
Hot take. Give us the hot take, Ben.
I saw something recently was talking about people doing all this specialized training with their kids, but they can't even do a quality push-up.
Yeah.
And so my opinion has been, I have my kids do a very basic workout 2 days per week. It'll be like a 12 to 15 minute EMOM with like push-ups, air squats, ring rows and stuff like that. And like sometimes they don't want to do it. And I've just have this take now that it's like, kids don't always want to eat vegetables either. They don't always want to do their homework, but there's certain things in life that as a parent, I know they need to do that are going to pay off. And so I've kind of made it my mission to give them a solid base in the things that I'm an expert in. And then I'm going to let the coaches handle the skill side essentially. And they've kind of bought into it now. They just know that we're going to do that 2 days per week. We're going to have a good attitude. And it's been fun to see. Now we'll be out in the garage gym and I'll be working out. They'll be playing in the front yard and they'll be like, hey dad, let me see how many pull-ups I can do. Or like, hey, I bet I can do more push-ups than Silas. And it's just kind of become this fun thing where they enjoy it and they've become proud of what they're able to accomplish now.
Yeah. So I completely agree on the perspective about the skills. I see that firsthand. In particular with baseball, there's a lot of emphasis on the skills, which there should be, right? Like, I mean, it's such a skilled sport, but then you have these kids who can't do a push-up to your point. And I think that long term, we need to be doing both, right? Like the way I look at it is the gym is simply just a way to round out what you're getting in sports. So if you're getting a ton of name the thing in sports, the gym just rounds it out. From my experience, and I'm going to be really curious what happens with you with the 4 children over time and how your perspective shifts. I'm curious because like as they get older, it's finding that balance between pushing too much and not pushing at all. And it's been a hard balance for me to follow because like, for example, for us, it's a prerequisite at our house that weekly we do self-defense. So that's the one thing that we're doing. It's like brushing your teeth, I say. It's like, dude, it's just something we do. But as they get older, you got to kind of pick and choose your battles. And that's been something I've had to kind of just kind of like detach from a little bit, like detach from like what I believe is important and like listen to what they need to have. And then finding that balance it's been difficult, but it's been something very rewarding for us at our house. I'll be curious how it goes for you guys in the future.
I do think that it's an important thing to echo, and we say this all the time, but I think it's important bringing it up every time. And Ben, this is like a constant in the content you put out. The first step though is, and this isn't an issue for us because fitness has just been such a big part of our lives forever, but for any dads listening or moms listening, like just acknowledging that you don't have a leg to stand on if you're not doing it yourself. Like that is just the first step for a lot of dads out there. Like if you want fitness and these things to be something that your kids are going to like be receptive to, like, oh, I should do this, but you're not doing it. Like, that's kind of the end of the conversation. So yes, these conversations are tough. I know that they're probably going to be tough with my kids too, as they get older. Right now they just kind of do everything you do, but it does change as they get older. But I know that I'll always at least be able to, with a straight face and zero hypocrisy say, hey, this is super important if they've seen me do it every year of their lives consistently and enjoy it too. Like not make it this thing of like, like I got to go to the gym. Like I enjoy it. It's an experience. I do what I enjoy and I stay consistent. So I always think that that's important bringing up. And Ben, that's something that you talk a lot about in your content. And I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. And Gabe, something cool to do that we've done, and I'm going to blow it. I'm not going to remember the 5 of them, but we made core values for our family. And we sat down and we helped let our kids help us write them out. And one of them was that we do hard things.
Yeah.
Like as a family, like we're going to serve our community and we're going to basically cheer each other on, like in what we're going for. Those were 3 of our core values. And so I think that's a really cool thing. And again, if you set core values with your family and you're not living it out, just the point is mute.
Yeah, you can't have the conversation.
We created a manifesto recently for Train Hard. So over the years, we've owned and operated gyms. And about a year or 2 ago, we launched Train Hard, which is the brand really to help men train, protect, and provide. And we started working on a manifesto. And the first piece of that manifesto was that the expectation is that life is going to be hard and that we need to do hard things to prepare for life. Like that's like the first, like if we could all walk into it as like everyone listening, if they could just realize, dude, life's going to be hard. Like that's the expectation. How do we prepare ourselves as much as possible? I think that's just a great place to enter in anything, you know, because life will be hard for your kids, for my kids, for Gabe's kids. Like there will be adversity. There will be things that we need to overcome. And like, I think as a parent, my job is to prepare them as best as possible. And I think fitness is a great tool to do that with.
That's the soundbite, guys. That's the clip from the podcast today.
What do your neighbors think about you? So I want to ask this because I host a weekly men's club where we get like 50, 60 guys in a parking lot just to throw down. And I do hill sprints up our hill. I do a lot of weird shit around our neighborhood. But what do your neighbors think about you?
The funny thing is, I feel like all of my neighbors are like 65.
Oh,
and I'll just be out there like barefoot, in some 3-inch inseam shorts, like lifting weights in the street, filming, and they're always just kind of like, "Hey." they know to expect it though. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. It's always so good. I always I'll watch it and definitely get some entertainment from it. Then I appreciate the content, but then I do spend 2 seconds thinking about the setup that this all entailed and kind of crack a laugh at he brought that equipment out. Who's filming up at the balcony? Did he just set that up? It's so funny.
What's funny though is, and y'all know this, being in the fitness game, it always comes up. That's all people know to talk to me about. And I think people always assume I'm like a physical therapist because they're like, "Hey, I've been having this problem in my low back." Like if I had $1 for every time a neighbor had asked me that. And so I'm always like, "Hey guys, listen, I have to preface this by saying I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a physical therapist. However, playing around with some glute bridges, Superman, stuff like that, talk to your doctor, but just get a good solid baseline of fitness, build that posterior chain. You'll be good."
Oh man, that's so interesting. I was at the gym this morning. I was actually coaching this morning at one of our gyms, and one of the women comes up to me and she's like, she was just asking me a very similar question, right? And I was just like, yeah, basically a lot of the problems people have can be solved by strength and conditioning. So many of them, just strengthening up the muscles that support that particular joint. And then doing some deep tissue work alongside that, right? Like foam rolling. This morning I had the group do kettlebell smashing, which I thought was a really good accessory piece for what we were doing. I just, that's always what but to your point, I get all the same questions and I preface it all the same way. I'm just like, "Hey dude, if you want to come and train hard with me, I'm down. But if you have a very specific thing, you should probably go see a physical therapist."
Oh yeah.
Oh man. And sometimes, Jay, you also take it upon yourself. I'm never going to forget Liz, who produces our podcast, was dealing with some shoulder stuff. And I just remember just Jason coming up and being like, "So I'm not a doctor or anything, but," and I was like, be careful. Whatever comes up after this.
That's the best way to start the sentence. "Hey, I'm not a doctor, but."
Ben, how old are you? If you don't mind me asking.
I am 34.
Okay.
No, I'm about to be 34.
Yeah. I'm 34. I saw one of your posts that I saw was giving your kids a 90s childhood. So we both grew up in the 90s. Tell me a little bit about that and what are some of the things that you want to bring back from the 90s for your kids?
Man, what spurred this on is I saw a mom post a video of her daughter checking the list of who had made the team for some sport tryout. And her daughter was walking back to the car crying. And the mom said something like, "I am both devastated as a mom, but also incredibly happy that she had this experience." She said, "I've been on her about practicing, but she's just been playing on her phone and watching Netflix. She never rides her bike. She doesn't do any extra practice." And she was like, when I was a kid, we were just kind of fit because we rode our bikes everywhere. We climbed trees. And it just kind of made me realize, that I've done a poor job of giving her that experience. And then for me, that was just kind of like, boom. Like I was like, kids, let's get on the bikes. And, when we were kids, man, we would like throw my skateboard over the handlebars of my bike. We would leave the house and we wouldn't come home until my mom had told us to come home.
Yeah, when the streetlights turned back on.
Yeah, dude. And so that's just been a big thing for my wife and with us and the kids is we want to, nobody's going to remember like the nights of watching Netflix, but they're going to remember the times that we loaded up the bikes in the back of my truck and like went to the park. And when I bought them some crappy skateboards and took them to the skate park for them to learn, and just emphasizing those type of things over what we buy them and what we're going to binge on Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, even it's funny because when I saw that post, it reminded me too of something that my wife saw that we've been doing. And man, I can tell the difference, having a toddler now at this age, at this time. And it's the difference in like the content that's out there for kids. Like she read this thing and it's been actually super impactful. It's so funny of like having him watch like 90s TV shows and like low stimulation stuff. And he still enjoys it. Definitely stick, because we're definitely not like, no TV, never. We're not those parents. We try and encourage being outside. We try and encourage doing other things, but there's definitely a time and a place where like, hey, we all need to chill out. We're just going to put something on TV and it's all good. But the difference between some of the YouTube videos that they have now for little kids that are like lights and music and the frame is literally changing like every half second. When he used to watch that stuff and you turn it off, so upset, such a tantrum. And when you put on like just, the Big Bear and the Big Blue House and like, all these like, old, Sesame Street, like stuff that we used to watch. It's still entertaining. They're still kind of watching it, but they're playing and then you turn it off and it's like nothing, they just move on to the next thing. So it's interesting that difference. And that's what the 90s thing reminded me of.
Yeah, dude. And I think it's our job to we always talk about creating the culture and we talk to our kids about, we're not Netflix people. And we do watch Netflix. We love watching cartoons. Don't get me wrong. But it's like we're going do people. We're not sit and watch people.
Yeah. And I mean, if you ingrain that in now, it gets easier as they get older, So like we just know that like at our house, you're going to sweat once a day and that's just part of the culture. We've definitely learned a lot on that journey. And I think that there's, you got to be compassionate, understanding, and give the kids some grace some days. But in general, that's what we like to do. And I think it stemmed from this early childhood of just being around this type of stuff. But to your point, Gabe, like, and I don't have a toddler, so I don't know what it's like, but dude, imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now. So like, imagine like adults on social media. It's all like boom, 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 boom. I mean, shit, we're creating content to engage the first 2 seconds, whatever it is. Imagine as our kids grow up and as we grow up, like, do you need more dose because you're so stimulated? You know what I mean? It's like if you went into a casino back in 30 years from now, or years ago, it probably looked one way. Then they started, instead of having the lever pull, then it was a button. Then instead of having a button, now it's like bright lights. And then they add in like air that flows in. So it makes me wonder like what's going to happen with our TV, our phones and whatnot to stimulate. And then at what point does it just get too much? I don't know. It's a great topic, and I think the 90s was a great example of what we should be doing. Remember like E.T.? Remember like some of those, dude. Yeah, throwback, baby, throwback. But yeah, brings up a good point.
Ben, as a student of fitness for as long as you've been in it, because you've been in it for a really long time, I'm curious, like your top 3 maybe or top 2. What are some like training myths that you see out there that just like need to die? Like, ooh, gotta end those.
Training myths that need to die.
That's a strong term, Gabe. Let's go.
Man, my big thing is sprinting. And I think nobody does it. And I'm just big on like educating people that like, I always joke about, I'm going to try to be able to beat my kids in a foot race as long as possible. And I'm going to hold the title of the fastest person in the family, until they take it from my cold, dead fingers. So one, it's important. I like it better than aerobic training. Don't shoot me. I know aerobic training is important too, but everybody places this big emphasis on aerobic training and like getting your 10K steps per day. Both are great, but hear me out, man. Get in those sprints once per week and they just play a massive benefit on one, maintaining your status as being a unit, as you're still a dad, and then just being able to perform. And then also just all of the physical benefits like aiding in fat loss, being good for muscle mass, getting out in the sunlight, just sprint.
I think that misconception comes in large part due to the fact that, people think they're going to get hurt. And I think that that's a big misconception too with like strength and conditioning in general. Like I know a lot of guys are just like, hey, like if I lift the weight, like my knees just can't take that anymore. My back, and going back to the point that Jason made before, like a lot of those issues can actually be solved by doing these things and doing these movements. But I do think that or I don't know if you guys think differently, that's at the crux of not wanting to sprint and sprint all out, is I feel like everyone knows that friend or that story of like, yeah, like, I started doing pick up softball and like, pulled a hammy, like as soon as I tried to, pick it up. So to your point, super important, but I think that that's kind of at the root of it. And I think it's like anything else, like not biting off more than you can chew to begin with, but man, going hard, even if you're doing it on a air bike or a rower.
Yep.
And not going straight into running sprinting, but it's more like the high intensity effort that's just so beneficial. Again, to your point, once a week, you're not doing it every day, but like dipping your toe in that is so important.
I've got one more. Everybody, we get in phases where there's like the big diet or the big workout format. That's like the big hot ticket. And like, if you're not doing that one, you're wrong. And like, for me, it's like weight training is it. That is the pinnacle of everything. Just like lifting heavy multiple days per week. And my brother was like 100 pounds overweight for years. He tried like all the diet plans. And I was like, bro, you've got to like start lifting weights, all this other stuff. I gave him like 1,000 programs and just never found success. Dude starts doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, drops 100 pounds. And
I mean,
and I look at him and I saw him and I didn't even know he was doing it. I was like, bro, your forearms look jacked. Like you've been lifting. He's like, nah, man, Jiu-Jitsu. And so funny story, Jason, I've got to shout him out too. He's actually following one of your programs. I think that's complementary to Jiu-Jitsu and loving it. And my second question is, Jason, he's 6'4".
Wow.
About 300 pounds and like a good 300, like he's built.
Yeah.
He's a purple belt now. Do you think I could take him?
No, I don't. Dude, your brother sounds like a monster. Your brother's 6'4", 300 pounds, purple belt. Dude, if I saw that guy at the gym, I'd be like, hey bro, my shoulder hurts today. I'm going to be okay here. Hey, I want to go back to something you said. First off, I think from a sprinting perspective, everybody should be doing it once a week. I totally agree. I try and incorporate it with the men's club on a regular basis. We in particular start with hills. I think hills is just an easier variation of it. But to your point about your brother, and I think this is a really, really, really good topic. He knows you're in the fitness space and you're trying to act with love, right? You're trying to be like, hey man, you're, blah, 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 whatever. And just never stuck, right? And I think there's part of it too that like, we have to be careful not to place our own interests. We can inspire and motivate, but like he found something that he identified with, which was jiu-jitsu. And who's to say, like, I think everybody should be weight training. I agree with that. But if jiu-jitsu was the catalyst that got things going, Gabe and I even talk about, someone like the Ozempic type stuff. Like if that was the factor that helped you start a journey to become a better self. And it wasn't like a crutch. It wasn't something you had, but it's just something that jumpstarts you like jiu-jitsu did. Fuck, dude, that's awesome. Good for you. And so I just want to share that. Like, I think that if you are looking at this and you're listening to this podcast, you're like, hey, I have a friend that's this. If you've tried to inspire and motivate a bunch of times, maybe try a different angle, or maybe try and introduce them to a different perspective, or maybe try something else. And if they want to do jiu-jitsu, that's awesome. But your brother, 6'4", 300-pound purple belt, that dude's a scary man because he's big enough to control you and he's technical enough to probably be a nightmare. I would not enjoy rolling with him. And I've probably rolled longer and I probably have better technique than him, but he's significantly bigger than me. So I imagine it'd be a nightmare. So anyways, I wanted to bring that up about this jiu-jitsu thing because you tried so long and he had to find the journey that was right for him. I think we just need to be aware of that.
I think that's huge. And I think it goes back to like, whether it be CrossFit, everybody's hating on High Rocks right now, but like you,
dude.
jogging, walking, like whatever. You just got to find what works for you and just get consistent doing it.
I saw the best video, Gabe. I have to send you this video. So Gabe and I did a High Rocks and we really enjoyed it. Like we had a great experience. I know he's doing another one soon, but I saw this video of like what people think High Rocks is or whatever. And there's just this guy, like the music was perfect. He's just kind of like using like these really tiny weights. It was like the funniest video, Gabe. I got to send it. I got to go find it.
I think I know exactly the video you're talking about. Dennis sent me a pretty good one too. Yeah, no, it's pretty funny. But yeah, man, it's just getting more people moving. It's getting more people moving. It's giving them like a goal to shoot for. Another thing we're really big on, and me and Jason have talked about this a lot, like the power of like signing up for something or having an event that you're looking forward to. And I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think there's just so much power to signing up for the marathon, signing up for the half marathon, like High Rocks, if that's going to be it, Jiu-Jitsu tournament, like just something to like, hey, I have this thing that's coming up. And so that in itself is kind of holding me accountable to like, you know, have a structured program. Like if I skip a day, if I skip 2 days, like I just can't make it 3 days in a row. It just gives you something more so than just like, hey, I'm doing this because I need to for fitness. And that's what I think High Rocks is doing a great job at. It's a great like mass participation event that people are getting fired up on, and they're excited to go to the gym on Monday because they signed up for the next one. And that's all we can ask for because we want more fit people. So
used to, I think I saw this quote the other day and it's like used to, it was like our lives were hard, but like our souls were at peace. Now our life is easy, so our souls are not at peace, something like that, to that effect. Yeah. And I think life used to just be hard and you just had to work hard because life was manual labor. I think now when you have access to everything easily and just a life of ease, you almost have to do some manufactured suffering to give that stimulus. Yeah. And so signing up for events or going to jiu-jitsu or doing a cold plunge or a sauna or, you know, doing Fran, just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations on purpose, I think is massively beneficial.
Man, and that's been specifically, like super specifically true for men. Like it was men that were doing all the manual labor that now are no longer doing that. Like that's been a big change for men in general. And that kind of segues into, I think this could be a really interesting conversation to have with you. Me and Jason, I think we agree on mostly, but I think we defer a little bit on this idea of like pushing or pulling you know, men to like really motivate them. And the idea here is that like, is the messaging that's beneficial to get men to like take their fitness and health seriously? Should it be more of like a push in that it should be like, hey man, you need to get your shit together. Like this is unacceptable. Like you signed up to be a dad and a husband. And if you look in the mirror and you aren't proud at what's looking back at you, like you just have to get your shit together. Like that's it. Like just cut the bullshit. Don't sugarcoat it. And, you know, Jason comes a lot more from the camp of like pulling, like just being very inspirational and motivational and a little bit more positive in the message. And I think the way that you approach content, to me at least, is much more in like the pull camp. Like I think your stuff is super positive. Like you lean into like getting people to smile and laugh and like get some entertainment with it. So I guess, you know, what's your take there? Like, what do you think resonates more with men? Why is it that you took the angle with your content that you have taken that I think is super positive? And is there ever a place to just be like, hey man, if you're a husband and you're a dad and you're not training, you're not making right decisions with your diet, like just gotta get your shit together. Like that's it. There's no other way to put it.
I'm going to give a very political answer and I'm sorry in advance, but it's both and, right? I started doing the content just because I thought it was funny. And I wish I could say I had this really like better decision behind it. Like I just wanted to inspire men and all stuff. I was just doing it because it was funny. And then I started getting all of these messages from dudes being like, hey man, like I've really been struggling and you gave me the motivation to start working out again. And, or, hey, you know, I've been like not investing in my marriage like I should have been, and I'm going to start going on walks with my wife and stuff. And the messages just started kind of coming out of nowhere and kind of blew me away. So I would say one, I think initially it starts with the pool. I think when other people are seeing what you're doing, that's just massive. And that's the cool and the beautiful part about social media. I know social media is a black hole. You can spend way too much time on it, but people are going to be on there. And if you can put a positive message out there for men, be like, hey, it starts with you. You lead from the front. You set the example for your family. And I think it's the same as us as men who are doing it. Put that example out there. Hopefully other men will follow. And then I'm not a tough conversation person. I shy away from tough conversations, but there is a time and a place for that. And when you really care about somebody, I think at a point you do have to have those conversations, especially once you have afforded yourself the ability to have that. I can't have that tough conversation with somebody I haven't invested in. But when I have invested in somebody, eventually I have awarded myself the ability to have those tough conversations.
That was a good answer.
Yeah, no, I love it.
I have a way that we can incorporate that for what we're doing too, right? Like we could put out both messages, but I think as you get to know someone, as they start really becoming a part of your community, you can start having more of those like for example, every week I got 50 guys in a parking lot. I'm much more comfortable being like, dude, I've been out here for 2 years. I've seen you. Like, you haven't changed. I'm more comfortable being like, bro, we've had a relationship for 2 years. You haven't changed. You got to stop drinking so much. But I'm much more comfortable because I've seen it. I've built a rapport. I've developed it. But anyways, I want to ask something, Ben. This is something, we got this from Thomas DeLauer. He always says like, hey, what have you changed your mind on? And I'm curious for you, what have you changed your mind on in fitness? What did you used to think was like the holy grail? And now it's like, I don't know, man. Because I got a few things on my list.
Give me one of yours first, Jason.
I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was at the gym. I was coaching. And I don't coach as much as I used to, but I was coaching. And we had program Diane, which is handstand push-ups and deadlifts. I was demoing the kipping handstand push-up. I could still rock out a bunch. It was pretty good, I hadn't done a kipping handstand push-up in literally years. I had not done a kipping handstand push-up. I have zero interest in doing a kipping handstand push-up ever again in my life, ever. But it was a part of the program for the gym. So I was explaining all the different variations. And one of the guys, he's doing it, got a little sloppy, right? He's trying to hit that top time. And he kind of tweaked his neck a little bit, like nothing crazy, right? But he finished up and I just thought to myself, like, bro, next time, let's just do some like heavy shoulder press. Like, we're going to be fine. We don't need to do kipping handstand. So that's something I've changed my mind on, is like, we don't need to but if you're inspired by these workouts, go for it. And there was a time in my life that's all that mattered. Dude, I would break my neck to get 20 seconds off my time. Now I've changed my perspective. That's an example.
Yeah. So this is probably a terrible answer. So
way to start this.
I always trained for function, right? When I was playing football, it was like the end goal. Like I didn't care how I looked. And it was like, bicep curls are stupid. They're not functional. Tricep extensions are stupid. They're not functional. Calf raises, I do those when I walk. And it's kind of funny, as I've aged and stuff, I was like, man, I kind of wish my arms filled out these sleeves a little bit better. There's a time and a place for a little bit of everything. And I think some good old fashioned vanity work 100% has a place in every person's workout. And I saw something the other day that I really liked, and I wish I could take credit, and I wish I remembered who to give credit. Okay. But it was like, if you're complaining about your wife not being attracted to you enough, do something about it. It's not your wife's job to always be attracted to you. And there's probably some things you could do better. And I know it's not all physical. However, I think when you put effort into your physical appearance, I think it bleeds into everything else that you do.
Yeah. That I think is the really strong part about that at least I've realized is it's not just, hey, if I look more jacked or look leaner, immediately that's going to improve but it permeates every other area where if I'm super focused on this, you make better dietary choices, which it's just going to make you feel better. It's going to improve your sleep. You're going to be in a better mood. You're going to show up better. You're going to help out more with the kids because you have better energy. She's going to see that, appreciate that. And just, it all just kind of builds so much momentum. And the workout piece and the improving body composition piece and whatever is just so black and white in your control. And the other things just kind of will fix themselves. You don't have to intentionally say, oh, well, now I'm going to have more energy. It just kind of happens. So I think that's the really important piece of that. I love it, man.
Yeah. And back to what you're saying, Ben, I came up in a system that was very even though I came up in the conventional gym, I then found CrossFit at a really early age. And I was very indoctrinated into the idea of functionality. I was teaching CrossFit seminars. I was very focused on that. And, I was pretty, I would say, closed-minded to anything other than compound movements. I was pretty closed-minded to it. I didn't think there was value in anything isolation-based. And now as I've gotten older, I'll give you another good example. Like today, we had a 4 quality day at the gym. And it's like, dude, back in the day, 4 quality? What are you talking about? Like it's either throttle or nothing. And now it's like, wait, there is a lot of value in going for 30 minutes, getting in a tremendous workout at a RPE of like 6 or 7 compared to a 10. And I think those are just things that as your training age evolves, your mind opens. And so I would encourage anybody listening right now, and this is something I think about on a regular basis, like, what am I closed off to today? That maybe 10 years from now, I'll look back on it and be like, damn, dude, I should have had a more open mind to that. Because 10 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have thought that I was completely open-minded, but I wasn't,
Yeah.
And I think for most guys out there, it ends up being just a training age conversation. That's something that I don't think enough like fitness professionals like talk about in general, because it's kind of getting into the weeds, but it's also kind of not. Like, it is very important. If you're new to training, you're just getting into weightlifting, you should do compound movements because you're still going to see body composition changes, strength. You're going to get everything. It's awesome. You're going to like benefit from all of that stuff. But once you've been at it pretty consistently 3-5 years, you can benefit from the isolation work, and you're not going to benefit as much from these movements that also now are going to take a lot of work and a lot of like demand on your central nervous system to like continue to PR your deadlift. Like, and do you even need to PR your deadlift? Now you can get a lot more out of some hamstring curls and some RDLs and that kind of stuff, like starting to build on the specific little pieces, but you also need to do it consistently for 3 to 5 years to get to the point where that's going to be beneficial. If not, you can just, bench press, strict press, pull up, deadlift, squat, and you're pretty good to go.
Yeah. And man, the fun thing too about fitness is the longer I do it, as long as like I'm getting the stimulus, it's amazing to me the things that I can still do when I haven't done them in a while, right? Like I never deadlift, but I could walk down into the garage right now and deadlift 500 pounds. It's just like, it's cool. Like you reap the benefits when you do it for long enough. Like, and it's just across the board. If you're doing the right things, the fun things that you're just able to do at any time. And I think that's the fun part about fitness as a dad is like, I want to be able to mix it up with my kids doing anything at any time. And like the first like alpha dad post I made, it was really dumb. I was wearing short shorts and like threw my leg up on the wall super high. And I was like, stay ready or something like that. And I think that's part of being a dad is just having a training baseline enough that I'm ready to do anything at any time. And I can do it without pulling a hammy.
Yep. You train, do you train solo most of the time?
That's a different conversation because that's an important one. But yes, like 99% of the time I train by myself. And I feel like other people are a distraction. And because I really like training and I don't like talking while I train. And just recently I started having this perspective. Jason was like, it's kind of like that'd be a great time to like mentor other people and develop relationships. So I've started randomly inviting guys over to the garage gym because I feel like I've been wasting it for several years.
Dude, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. So I completely agree with you. I came up in a system where training with other people was actually really beneficial for me because I got a nice push. And I mean, I was competing with other guys and I didn't know it was possible until I watched them do it. But I train alone, but I train with people most of the time. And to your point, one of my neighbors, for example, he comes over every day and I have a group of guys almost every day in the garage. And the community, the connection, the mentorship, like I can mentor them in fitness modalities, right? Like introduce them to the first time doing Gabe, yesterday I did for the first time a leg extension on the rower. What do you call it? A glute bridge, glute bridge on the rower, right? And he had never done it. Or a tempo heel elevated squat, never done it. And you can mentor them, but also through that process, you start having conversations about life, man. And I feel like that's something that people don't put enough emphasis on is that you have an hour of your day, especially if you're doing some strength training, to like connect with people and just talk about life and talk about what's going on. Hit a set. And then when you're time for a Metcon or whatever, like obviously you're not talking, But I find that to be a really valuable time. So I'm so glad you're exploring it, Ben. That's going to be really rewarding for you, I'm sure.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because I fall in exactly the same camp of like, I don't want to talk to people. I don't like, I go in there, I have my plan. I want my music on and I want to just get after it and like, put another brick in the foundation of like this fitness thing that I'm building. But I think that it is very valuable time. And this came up on the podcast the other day. I think that right now would just be really tough because I have no consistency in when I can really go out there with the really young kids. Like some mornings it's just not in the works. So, that makes it tough. But I think hearing both of you talk about it, I think it is a little bit, I don't know if closed-minded is the right word to use, but it is such an opportunity to share something that's like so powerful for you with other men specifically. But like what you said in the beginning, like I relate to that 100%. But yeah, it's all an evolution, right?
It's also, men have a hard time like talking about emotions and stuff like that. And I think when you put it in the gym, it puts people, and I hate to use the word, like a safe space. It puts men in a place where they're comfortable to have like conversations. And I won't use his name, but like I had a friend who I hadn't talked to in a while recently, and his dad died and it was unexpected. And I just kind of texted him because I felt like I needed to. And I was like, hey man, like the polite thing, let me know if you need anything. And I really didn't expect him to respond. And he messaged me back. He's like, honestly, bro, he was like, I could really use a workout. And that was it. And he came over and worked out. We didn't talk that much, but I felt like it was kind of like it got him away from a tough situation just to come and not think about the hard thing he was going through for a few minutes. And I feel like it's just such an easy avenue, like to be able to help people. Just, hey, let's squeeze in a workout.
Dude, it's so like 2 years ago, I started asking myself, what can I do to be a better beacon in my community? Like, and not just talk about it, but like be about some shit, like walk the walk. And I started saying like the best thing I could do is just start inviting guys to work out with me. And I think that especially people who listen to this podcast who are in the fitness space, who love fitness, most people that listen to us do, it's easy for us in general to feel inspired and go train. For a lot of guys, that's just not the case. And if you could invite them over and you take care of the like, hey, we're going to do this, dude, there's a lot of value in that for them. Just like if they were to help you with your finances and you're like, dude, just show up, I'll take care of you. How cool would that be if that's something you're struggling with and you have a buddy who could just help you out? I would encourage you to reach out to a friend and just start doing that. And not to mention, they hold you accountable. Like when I put out a text, and every day at 6 a.m., we're training every day. I don't know how many people are going to show up, but it's like that holds me accountable to be there. So yeah, Ben, I mean, dude, I would encourage you to keep going down that path. And it's really opened up some interesting conversations. Like even a buddy of mine yesterday, we started having a conversation about faith. I wasn't thinking it was going to come up. It just came up, right? And who knows where that could go in the future, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like yesterday afterwards, we start playing different music and start creating a different energy sometimes. You know, it's cool.
I listened to I thought it was a really powerful podcast the other day. It was about addiction and the 12 steps, but how that applies to all different types of addiction, not just alcohol. And it brought up, and this is apparently, I haven't listened to the TED Talk, but it's a really popular TED Talk, but this idea that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And it was really, really powerful. And it speaks volumes to, I think, a lot of what Jason, you're doing with the men's club and, you know, Ben, like, you know, what you're seeing with having guys come on, because again, addiction is so many things. It's, you know, like being too obsessed with your work. It's being addicted to your phone, which is something that I'm struggle with a lot. I've talked about it on the podcast. I'm trying to get better at it. You know, it could be alcohol. It could be all these other things, but the opposite of that isn't just having the discipline to like not do the thing. It's finding like meaningful connection that replaces this actual urge that you're trying to fix with these other vices. And I think that that's especially important for men because there's so much shit to be addicted to nowadays that isn't doing us any favors. So, but that was a really, really powerful line. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
I have no scientific data to back this up with, but like on 2 podcasts I've listened to recently, and one of them was like Andrew Peterson and another one was somebody else. But like one of them, the popular clip that's going around is talking about like one of the biggest indicators of longevity is like quad development.
Yeah.
And one of the others is meaningful relationships. And that's the cool thing about fitness is that we can do both of those simultaneously
at the same time.
Oh man,
big legs and good friends.
Dude,
make
2 for 1 special. Hey, dude, wait, I'm ready. So manufactured suffering and big, wait, what was it? Big legs?
No, big legs and good friends.
And good friends. I'm going to say that at the next men's club. I'm stealing that. Ben, I want to ask you what role, how long have you and your wife been together for?
We have been together for 14 years, married for 11.
Okay. Yeah. So a pretty long time. What does that look like? So you being like the fitness guy, her just her having that background that she had. And then your words, not like in love with it, but doing it. How's that relationship been in regards to fitness? And what are you guys doing that you think keeps you guys on point? Having 4 kids that are young, like what's the glue there?
Man, so one, I love fitness, and something I learned at an early age, like my wife's like cranking out babies, guys. This is a hard thing to do. It's devastating on the body, right?
It is.
And it's like,
it's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's the hardest. I mean, it's something we can't even get close to related to,
Yeah. And not even to mention like postpartum depression and stuff like that. And I'm young, like I'm really into fitness, 6 weeks go by and I'm like, hey, you ready to hop out in the gym? It's time to crank this thing back up. Right. And just like learning patience and stuff like that. And that, being on the same page that for her, it's not the end all be all. It's just like a way to stay fit for her kids. And, at the very least, she wants to look good. And I would say the biggest thing for us in marriage is that when we're being silly is when we are at our best. And I think a lot of times, I'm not a marriage expert, but marriage, you eventually can become roommates and you're kind of just like doing life together. I have found that when my wife and I are being silly and joking, like that's when we're at our best, and always making time for stuff like that.
Ben, your first 2 kids were pretty close together, right? What were the ages again? They were all close together.
Yeah, our first 2 are 14 months apart.
Yeah. So yeah, we had 16 months apart, and I'm telling you, dude, the past 2 years have been like a relationship boot camp for me and my wife. Like we have grown so much together through like the intensity of that, particularly going from 1 to 2. 1 to 2 for us was like, oh boy, we went from 0 to 1 and it was like, we had a lot of help. We're very fortunate, very blessed, but going from 1 to 2 was like, all right, we had to figure some stuff out. And I feel like now it's always an ongoing journey, but we're kind of like on the other side of that. And yeah, it's been incredible. And to your point, it's been like watching my wife go through that process, like the amount of just like patience and control you need to give up on the entire situation once you have, 2 young kids rolling around, and how unpredictable all of that is. And a lot of parallels with like, I love fitness too. And like all of a sudden, like you might be able to get a workout. You might not, you might get a good night's sleep. You might get 0 sleep, and you never know what's going to happen. Like usually they lull you with like 4 weeks of consistency into thinking that like you got a pattern figured out, and then boom, curveball. So, yeah, man, that's all been super, super powerful. And to your point about like being silly, I'll send you a picture when we're done recording, but we literally just printed, my wife and I, the only thing we've ever like had printed as like, if you want to call it a family value, we have this picture where the 4 of us are wearing sunglasses and it's silly. And we made that into a print and just wrote, make it fun on it, because we wanted that like literally to be like a centerpiece of our home, and like a reminder of, dude, there are some nights where like, dude, it's so not fun, but like you can always make it fun, right? Like you can always like just laugh about it. Like it is what it is. Kids poop in the tub. Like it's absolute chaos in this house from like 5 to 7 p.m. every night. But like, we can put some music on and make it fun, or we can just like throw our hands up and freak out and like, like make it the worst thing ever. So I appreciate you sharing that. And there was so many parallels. I'll send you a picture of the print. It's pretty cool.
I love that. There's a guy named Nate Norman. He's a big deal on Twitter, and his thing, it's kind of a funny name because of the song, but his big thing is Big Dad Energy.
Mm.
And he's a really cool guy, and he always talks about, he works manual labor, and at the end of the day, he'll text his wife, and he'll be like, hey, turn on the Bluetooth speaker. And he'll turn on like AC/DC before he walks in the house, and he'll like kick the door open and be like, what's up, guys? And just start like wrestling with the kids and just start like just havoc when he comes in the house. And like, it's his thing. It just becomes WWE when he walks through the door. And I've tried it a few times and it never disappoints.
That's a good idea. I mean, I don't know if it'll work exactly the same at my house, but that's a great idea. I like that. I think Ashley might kill me if I try and kick down the door, but I get the idea. Dude, I just, before we close out, I just definitely want to mention, you mentioned something just briefly in passing. As a husband, if your wife is going through, you use the term postpartum depression. That's a real thing, and it's really to be aware of. If you recently had a baby and your wife is struggling, you got to be super supportive and do everything you can, because we went through some of that as well. And I think at the time I should have had more grace. I just didn't have enough, time on this earth to realize like that there's a lot of hormonal changes going on. There's a lot of things that are occurring in a woman's body. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at all on this. All I'm saying is that your wife, if you recently had a baby and she's struggling, you got to do everything you can to be more supportive, because looking back on it, I didn't do what I could to try and connect because I couldn't relate. I should have tried to relate more and given more grace. So I just want to make sure I brought that back around, because you mentioned it briefly. And I know that there's probably some men out here who either are having kids or recently had kids who might be hearing some of that. They should look up, find some resources, and do everything they can to be supportive through that process.
100%. And just to add to that, I think as men, we're fixers.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, I'm struggling. And I'm like, well, if you did X, Y, and Z, it'd solve the problem. So you should do is you should do this.
You have a great podcast you should listen to that will really help you solve these issues.
Yeah. So with that being said, I was doing a training recently, and it was just talking about like literally in everything in life, you listen 2-to-1 ratio to talk, right? And so as men in those situations, I think most of the time we just have to like listen rather than fix. And lots of the times, just like literally listening to what she's going through is what she needed. It wasn't for me to fix it.
It's not the first time we've heard that on the podcast, and it's so important to like bring up every single time. I need to remind myself once a week that there are times where and I'll catch myself, like I'll be listening and coming up with like, oh, like this is an easy solution. And
what you ought to do.
I think she just wants me to listen. I'm just going to listen. Dude.
You know what? We have a big fundraiser coming up for an annual fundraiser for pediatric cancer, and I got to catch myself because she'll be sharing something, and I'm thinking, oh, let me see how can I add something to this? How can I fix this problem? It's like, dude, I got to remind myself, like, she probably doesn't want anything from you other than just an ear to like, listen. So thanks for that, Ben. I'm gonna write that one down too. That's my stop trying to fix.
So important. So important.
Oh man. Well, Ben, I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I love the energy. I love your outlook. If you guys have been listening to this show for a while, we have guest episodes like with Ben and many other guests. We also have podcasts with Gabe and I. We have ones with our spouses that have dropped on Valentine's Day. It's mid-March right now. Go back, check out the other episodes. Leave the podcast a rating review. Share it with a friend. If you have a friend who's going through something similar, whether it's the brother, whether it's wife, what you name it, share it with a friend. It helps out the podcast. But most importantly, forget about the podcast. It helps out the ecosystem. It levels people up. And that's our ultimate goal of this podcast. And when we receive feedback from you guys that the conversations are impactful, not just on your fitness, but in your life, dude, those are the best ones. So Ben, where can people find you if they want to, learn more about you and what you have going on?
Basically at Ben Barker Fitness everywhere.
Some good videos and some good laughs coming. You gotta go. Gotta go follow.
Everywhere. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I hope you and your families have a great rest of your year, great rest of your month, great rest of your day, and keep training hard.